We thank you very much for this invitation. My name is Katie Katapodis. I'm the acting chairperson of SANEF. Our chairperson has recently given birth to our newest and youngest SANEF member. Yes, so she's unable to be with us today as she still is on maternity leave. So she does send her apologies, as does our Secretary General, Moipumi Malefani. She too sends her apologies. With us today, we've got senior members of the SANEF Executive Committee. At the back, we've got Sbu Ngalwa. He is a regional convener. There's Adrian Basson. He's our Treasurer General. Mary Papaya is our acting chair of Media Freedom, and Kate Skinner is our Executive Director. We also have in the room with us today esteemed editors and journalists, many of whom by the time they leave will be SANEF members, Mr. President. We come with membership forms in hand. The reason this interaction is so important to us is we find it quite fortuitous. At a recent SANEF Council meeting, just 2 days after SONA, we put on our agenda interaction with the Presidency and the President as a very important part of what we need to do, and the frequency, of that interaction. And it was quite fortuitous because we resolved to write a letter to Kusela, but almost 2 days later, she wrote first. And she ended up writing to our chairperson to say we'd like to meet with SANEF. Yeah. There's a great, don't let the media hear you're shocked. So we think that this is really important. We would love to propose to you today, and I'm sure you'll hear it from our colleagues here, that seeing you in environments like this is really important to us. We would love to propose that we do it quarterly. We would love to see the Cabinet and SANEF Lekgotla being reinvigorated. Those were really interesting and very worthwhile opportunities, and they've been very, very successful in the past. Because if there's one thing we know for sure is that a connection and a transparent and honest conversation between media and government is absolutely critical, especially at this time in our country. We are dealing with extremely serious issues in our country. Just a few hours ago, we officially went into a technical recession, as we all know, and there is no more important time for us than now to talk very openly about what we are facing as a country, but also what we're facing as a media. And Mr. President, today we talk to you in the backdrop of our media inquiry into media ethics and credibility. In 2019, we approached Judge Kathy Satchwell to head this inquiry for us because there were issues within our industry that we needed to properly look at, because there were areas of concerns for us. We wanted to introspect as an industry, and we wanted best practice, to see what best practice there was internationally. So Judge Satchwell, together with Nikiwe Bikicha and Richard Kondo, have received over 80 substantive submissions to the inquiry, and we're hoping to hear from them by May with their findings. They're coming to Cape Town next week, actually, to have a series of interviews here. And it's really important for us that we do a proper job on that, and that we're able to properly introspect and then share the findings of Judge Satchwell with not just yourselves, but with the wider South African community, because trust in media is critical, media freedom is critical, and I'm hoping that these are some of the issues that our colleagues here today will also expand on. But from our side as SANEF, we thank you again for inviting us here today, and we look forward to a really vibrant interaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie, and I think to appreciate those words, because that is really the spirit of this meeting. Your Excellency, Mr. President, if I could invite you to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Kusela. Thank you to all of you, to the officials and the leaders of SANEF. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to have this, informal exchange with yourselves. It is a welcome opportunity for me, and in a way, it is also long overdue. We should have done this some time ago, and we should find a way of reconnecting and doing this. And you're proposing that we should do this once a quarter. I would be delighted with that, and let's see how it works out with the program. My boss here will have to calibrate the program properly and see how best we can do it. But I really welcome this, and we will also look at the other aspect that we used to have. It happened once or twice when I came into government, but it used to happen in the past. I'm quite happy that we should review that and possibly go back to that, and we'll discuss it with the colleagues in the cabinet. We are delighted because government and the media, I think as you correctly said, share a common responsibility. We are in the same space, same country, but we also have a common duty to uphold and to advance our democratic dispensation. And what you do in many ways does precisely that. So in carrying forward this responsibility, it is a common task that we have. We as government have to inform the people of our country about the work that we do, but you as media also need to do that, but obviously you do that from a different perspective. But for starters, I need to say that we do appreciate the work that you do, much as quite a bit of it is being critical of us. We applaud the work that you have done and the role you have played in the last 25 years in advancing the values of our Constitution and in helping to build our democracy. Because you have played a particularly important role in the recent past in exposing state capture, corruption, and at times you've done it at personal risks to yourself and under very difficult and trying circumstances. The media has that important role to play a bulwark against the abuse of power, whether it is in government or in business and elsewhere in society. That is your job. Now, while freedom of the media is constitutionally protected and in our country upheld, you as the media, you're also confronted by a whole range of pressures as well as challenges. Some of these are brought about by technological changes that continue to take place in our common space, but you're also affected by a weak economy. The economy that we now live under also affects you in a number of ways. And we are keen to hear SANEF's perspectives. And this is where the point that was put forward by Kusela gains currency, that it should not just be a one-way type of exchange. I would really like to hear your own perspectives on a number of issues, including the challenges that you face as the media. And if we can do that, we will then be able to have what I would regard as a much more meaningful exchange. In the State of the Nation address, I said that our focus for 2020 will be on inclusive growth. Because without growth, we cannot create jobs. And without jobs, we cannot tackle the poverty that is so pervasive in our country. This morning, statistics, South Africa confirmed that our country has had 2 quarters of negative growth, and therefore we are in a technical recession. Now, the poor growth figures for the last quarter are not pleasing, but at the same time, they could not have come as a shock or a surprise to us, because the signs were there. The signs were there, and that drive us to this lack of growth and this technical recession that we are in now has been there for all of us to see. It's been the load shedding and the impact that it has had on production, both at the manufacturing level as well as with trade. Agriculture slumped down the greatest. And that could also be ascribed to the drought that many parts of our country have been experiencing. But I think more importantly, just business and consumer confidence has been negatively affected as well. So a combination of all these factors have led to the negative growth, and which is quite big, 1.4% in the past quarter. Now, the drivers of this also points to the underlying weakness in our economy and the effect of global economic uncertainty. And right now, the world is going through another moment of great uncertainty, which is going to have a huge impact on growth. The coronavirus that is spreading around the world is obviously going to have a major effect on the economies around the world. Whilst in our own country we do not have incidents at the moment of this virus, but it's already affecting more than 72 countries around the world, and no doubt we are also going to be a candidate as more and more countries are being affected by this virus. And it immediately has an impact on travel, on importation of goods and exporting of goods. So we are going to be affected quite negatively as it spreads. And worst of all could well be the impact it could have on the health of our people, which we are going to be guarding against as much as we possibly can. I was supposed to have a visit from Nordic country Prime Minister. He called yesterday and said, Mr. President, I can no longer come because a number of my country's countrymen and women have now contracted coronavirus, and I cannot travel because I've got to stay home and attend to this. Conferences are going to be cancelled and postponed, so it's going to have a huge, huge impact. But the recession underlines the urgent need for us as a country to embark and continue on the measures that we announced in SONA. We cannot sit back and not do what needs to be done. We will need to sharpen our focus and concentrate our efforts on the reforms that we need to embark upon, and also to implement the initiatives that we announced. More than ever, we need to work towards the social compacts that are important to deliver inclusive growth as we move forward. To have any hope of success, we need obviously a reliable and sustainable electricity supply. We are therefore moving with urgency, as we have said in the past, to implement the ESCOM roadmap towards operational and financial recovery, and at the same time opening up the regulatory space for independent power producers and self-generation. And the good step we've taken is that we're stabilizing the management of ESCOM and having appointed a CEO who is now at the helm of moving ahead with all these reforms. We are also obviously going to be establishing a very good basis for a restructured energy sector that is more efficient, more cost-effective, and more sustainable. As indicated in the budget, before I even get to the budget, I want to talk a little bit about the efforts of our social partners, with whom we also met yesterday morning at the NEDLEC level. We've come up with a compact on electricity. What was pleasing yesterday was to hear that they are still committed to the proposal that they put forward. They are, all of them, as the three partners, including government, are actively and proactively discussing that proposal, and they tell me that, Mr. President, it's 80 to 90% there, and we are making tremendous progress. Now, obviously, I'm glad that they have not been distracted by the barrage of criticism and negative publicity on this very unique and historic compact that the social partners have crafted. They are sticking to their task of finalizing their compact, and they're improving it as they move on, which for me is quite pleasing. And I will be sitting down with them to hear precisely how far they have gone. Now, as indicated in the budget, we are committed to reduce public spending, to manage our debt, and to shift more resources to support economic growth. Now, some of these steps may not, look so as impressive as many people have been thinking that they should. But in our view, there are the steps that we need to take that can move us forward and make us have the level of growth that we want to. Now, as we make savings in a number of areas, we need to ensure that we support growth. And we have identified a number of many areas where we need to make savings. We have therefore, in doing all this, chosen not to pursue a path of austerity, which would have improved public finances at the expense of growth. And that is also why we have not introduced any major tax increases, because when you do that, that means that you are really introducing harsh austerity measures. We've chosen the balanced route, and we are engaging, obviously, with public sector unions on the wage bill. Now, their concerns are understandable. They argue that they don't want to be the sacrificial lamb, and they want to sit down with us so that we have thoroughgoing discussions on all the matters that we want to see addressed. And their concerns clearly are understandable. They want to address corruption, irregular and wasteful expenditure. And the pleasing thing is that the Minister of Public Service and them are going to have their people meeting with the unions and crunching the numbers and making sure that we come up with a solution. As we work to stabilize key state-owned enterprises, we also want to repurpose SOEs for growth and development. Amongst other things, all SOEs need to have a clear economic as well as a developmental purpose and be financially sustainable. Now, through the SOE Council, which we'll be announcing soon, we will consider which entities can be merged and obviously which entities can be restructured, and if need be, which entities also need to be shut down. We expect SAA business rescue practitioners to present their plan by the end of March. This clearly needs to be widely consulted on. As a shareholder and guarantor of much of SAA's debt, government will need to be certain that the plan will, in the end, lead to a viable airline on a restructured basis, and that it is no longer dependent on the fiscus. Now, that is our broad strategic aim. Now, infrastructure, which I spoke about also in previous SONAs and including the last SONA, is, in our view, critical to our growth strategy. It is an area which we let slump in the past few years, but we know the catalytic role that infrastructure plays in the economy, and also with regard to job creation and also attracting investment. But apart from that, it also provides a very strong foundation for increased sustained growth into the future. We've therefore, in realizing the important role that it plays, to locate it in the Presidency, and the Infrastructure and Investment Office, which is led by Dr. Cyril Ramaphosa, is now coordinating this whole effort, together obviously with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, together with a number of other partners, including the DBSA and the Infrastructure Fund and other entities. Our recent engagement with senior representatives of local as well as offshore-based financial institutions indicated that there is great appetite and enthusiasm for our infrastructure drive and opportunities to mobilize all manner of financial structuring, including blended finance, PPPs, and a whole number of others, and some even willing to invest in the infrastructure fund. Now, what they said to us very clearly and unequivocally is that money is not the problem. And they said, all you need to do is to package projects. Give us bankable projects that can be well packaged, whether they are investment type of projects or social projects, package them and bring them to the fore, and we will engage with them. And we have a huge appetite to do precisely that. And some of them even said you can leverage even some of the multinational finance institutions like the Development Bank that we've invested money in. And they've said to us, do what China does. China puts in money in that investment in the new Development Bank. They will put in, say, 10 billion, and they will extract 100 billion because they leverage what they have put in. And they said, do exactly that. And it so happened that we had put in our investment, and we had not followed that up with good projects. And we are now wide awake, and that's precisely what we are going to do. So on the infrastructure drive, which I see as the flywheel to drive this vehicle, I believe that we will gain a lot of traction, and I've said to my team that we would like to see yellow equipment across the landscape of our country, and infrastructure can do that for us. Be it social infrastructure, building roads, paving roads, either in the rural areas, in the townships, and putting up huge buildings for either student accommodation, housing, building bridges and dams and what have you. So I think we could have arrived at an interesting era, and I'm delighted that we got an engineer, Dr. Ramaphosa, to drive this effort for us. And we've also got a very focused minister in Patricia de Lille who will together drive this. And we've got wonderful partners like the DBSA who are well adept at being involved in these types of projects. And we've got all the banks who have a huge appetite to participate. On the industry side, on the economic sector side, one of the things that I really had great interest in is to look at every sector of our economy in a very introspective way and not just look right across and say, what is it that needs to be done in each of the sectors? And that is what led to the master plans that we now are focusing on. And we're putting every brick down on the ground and looking at every sector and seeing what master plan we can come up with, rather than just being generalists. And to this end, we've now concluded a number of master plans in the poultry, in the textile and leather and clothing industry. And we're going to be looking at fuel cells and renewables and ocean economies. And obviously the idea and the plan is to get all the key role players from labor right through to investors to look more closely at what needs to be done. And the exciting work which will kick in as we move forward is that some of these sectors are saying if we can line up all the planets, in a straight line in their sector, we should be able to create thousands of jobs. 120,000, one of the sector identified. And this is being done beyond the process that we had, the labs that we had, Pakisa labs. Now we're doing it at a more sort of granular sector level. And that for me is quite exciting, because we're going beyond just general speak and looking at what the investors and the companies, including the workers, themselves have to offer. Of course, another challenge that we have to face, which we've also sought to address in the SONA, is the youth unemployment. With the huge challenge that we have with so many young people in our economy unemployed, we've had to come up with what I would call a stimulus to stimulate the economic players in our country being able to be well primed and prepared to employ young people. Now, this we are coordinating through the Project Management Office, which is also in the Presidency. And the intervention consists of a number of programs. We've identified 5 programs. We'll add on another one. And it builds on existing initiatives. But what we are doing is to coordinate all of them. And we're bringing in various partners, of course, the young people themselves, who have clearly said to us, nothing about us without us. So we bring them in, and they have participated in crafting some of these initiatives, and they're quite excited and in being part of this. And of course, the private sector as well as government. And the first program is the Pathway Network Management System. We want to bring as many as 3 million young people into this pathway network, and so that they participate, be online, so that we have profiles of them and they are able to be assisted in finding opportunities and preparing to access those opportunities. And it builds on a well-renowned initiative and experience of Harambee. And Harambee started off a number of years ago and now works with the Department of Employment and Labor. When I was at the AU, Namibia had asked the AU to help them to look at youth unemployment, and Harambee was one of those initiatives that they were also looking at. So that in itself leads to a coordinated and integrated resource, which will also, through this initiative, be massively scaled up. And as we do all this, we obviously working with the National Youth Development Agency, the Department of Small Business, and through this, we also give an opportunity for young people to start their own businesses. And some of them are so clever, they are so savvy, and they come up with interesting ideas to start their own businesses. And this will also involve the YES program. Many of you will have heard us talk about the YES initiative. We had expected much more out of the YES project, where the private sector would participate in bringing in young people into employment. It is moving on, and we wanted it to have moved on much further, but it is stabilizing its own foundation as it moves on, and it will continue playing a very important role in helping young people to get into the world of work. And some of them are then exposed to business processes, are then able to move out and start their own businesses. And the other one, of course, is to have short training courses for young people to improve their skill base as well. And of course, we want also to get moving with the Presidential Youth Service, which we're now crafting, because a number of young people want to give back. They want to demonstrate their patriotism, and we now are putting together vehicles that will enable them to do precisely that. Now, I will end soon so that I can ask you questions. Another potential driver, which we've also spoken about, is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which comes into effect later this year. Now, more than any other country on the continent, I think South Africa is really the one country that is truly well placed to benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because we still remain the most industrialized country on the continent, and a number of businesses still see us as the gateway into Africa. And if there is any country that is able to manufacture goods that it can spread out throughout the continent, it is South Africa. And so we're going to make a big play of this. We've already met a number of South African businesses, and we'll meet again so that they can come up with strategies and plans. Obviously, they are very independent as business entities to take up precisely what this has in offer for them. Now, during our AU chairship, we will work hard to put in place the necessary agreements, the rules and the regulations that will govern this free trade area. And that is one of the priority areas that we've identified for our chairship, that we want to see this AFCTA coming into real operation. And we were rather fortunate to have the young person who helped to draft the Free Trade Area Agreement being appointed as the first Secretary General. So we believe that not so much that he'll be working for South Africa, but we will be able to give him the support that he needs, as other countries will as well. Now, over the last 2 years, we made important progress in rebuilding public institutions. Public institutions that were severely damaged by state capture and corruption. And many of our institutions were under attack, they were weakened, and many good people were either made to leave or left. Now, we've acted quickly to stop the rot, and in a number of the institutions, SARS being one of them, the NPA, and a number of others, to stabilize those institutions and to put in place capable and committed people. This obviously is an ongoing process because it took years to weaken them and to put them under severe negative pressure. And now it requires persistence, and it also requires constant vigilance. It's not going to be a one-day process, and many of us obviously wanted it to be done and dusted in just one day. And the weakening happened over a period, as you well know, and you were at the real center of revealing quite a lot of what happened. Now, understandably and correctly so, there is a strong public pleasure that those who are implicated in state capture should face justice, and because it would send a strong message, a strong signal that the era of impunity is over, and that will also build and rebuild also public confidence in the country and help to restore trust in our law enforcement institutions. Now, as the President and also as members of the executive, even yourselves as the media, we cannot and should not be making the decisions on investigations and prosecutions. Our role is to ensure that the relevant institutions are effectively resourced. Our role is to make sure that they are strengthened, they are supported, they are not weakened, they are not undermined, and that they perform their constitutional mandate without any fear, prejudice, or favor. This is what our Constitution dictates. And I've often said that the day, as people are urging now, that you must take action, you must prosecute and all that. And I say, the day a president does that, it is time to run for the hills, because it basically means that the president acts as judge, executioner, and everything else, and our Constitution does not prescribe that. Now, to succeed in all this, we have to build, obviously, a strong social compact for change. We have already done much to bring about social partners together, but we also need a social compact that will be more pervasive across society, where we all act as guardians of our constitution, of right things that need to be done in our country. Now, we have gone a long way to try and build that type of social compact, and we believe that it can and it will work. Now, after many years of working at cross purposes, there should now be a commitment from all of us across society to work together for a common goal. We will all continue to have our own particular roles in which we have to act, and occasionally we will be at odds with each other, but there is a strong sense that we will only succeed if we work together. Together, all of us in government, as well as with our media, as well as all other social partners. We see, obviously, the media as being a key partner in all this, and that is why today I really welcome this opportunity to meet with all of you in the way that we are now, to exchange views and thoughts, because we still have a long way to go to reposition our country so that it becomes the country that all of us have dreamed of. Thank you very much. Should I stand here? Oh, may I return to my seat?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So we'll allow him to sit. I don't know if the President's mic is on. If it's not, please help us get it on. We're going to take a round of inputs. We're going to take a round of inputs, questions, comments that you'd like to make. I'll take 3 at a time like we'd agreed, and then I'll come back for the next round. So I'll start with you if you introduce yourself and your media house, please.
Hi, Mr. President. Paul Leclerc from Bloomberg. Just on the public sector wage negotiations, it seems that you may have, or your government may find a bit of a time crunch. We've got ratings agencies in about 3 weeks' time coming out with their ratings, and then also the government goes into the new financial year, so all of those sort of things have to be sorted out. So how confident are you on the unions agreeing to this? And then secondly, although you like summits and compacts and all that, there is a sense within the unions from speaking to them that you may have broken a compact with them on this deal. Can you react to that as well, please?
Thank you.
Hi, Karima Brown, anchor of the Fiscal here. Mr. President, there has been a lot of talk about whether this budget has been an austerity budget or a stimulus budget. You've rejected the idea that it's an austerity budget, but your social compact partners have responded and said that this is in fact an austerity budget. On Thursday, your economic advisory panel meets with you. Are you prepared to revisit the macroeconomic fundamentals? You've been doing the same thing for over 25 years. You have the same problems. Are you now open to looking at things differently and a new economic model?
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm Sun News 24. Firstly, thank you so much for this engagement and for in principle agreeing to a request from SANEF for a quarterly engagement. We will definitely take it up with your boss's office and get those dates fixed. I also want to ask you about the social compact, specifically with regards to the discussion at NEDLAC at the moment around the Eskom debt due. I heard you remarking quite negatively in notes today on the not being distracted by the negative publicity around the deal. Don't you think that's almost a bit unsympathetic to the very real concerns expressed so far by the government pension fund, the PIC themselves, and also the unions? about using pensions to bail out effectively Eskom and their debt. We also heard your Finance Minister Mboweni saying in his pre-budget press conference that it wouldn't be fair only to utilize public sector pensions, but that private pension funds must also be looked at. This has obviously caused quite a stir in the industry, and we've heard people going against that. What is your view on Minister Mboweni's opinion in this regard? And then secondly, don't you think this is almost a predetermined outcome for Eskom's debt problems, and that we are not looking at other options outside of utilizing pensions, whether it's public and private or just public? Thank you.
Which one? You want me to stand or sit?
Please remain.
No, I want to stand. No, thank you. Thank you very much. Paul, somehow I knew that will be the very first question that you will fire off. How confident? Well, let me start off by saying the unions are saying we could have broken a compact that we had. Well, that's what is going to be discussed. That's what is going to be discussed, and these are trying and testing times. And what we are not saying, we're not saying, everybody's salary be cut by half or whatever. We are saying that it is the rate of the increase that we should look at once again. Now, the interesting part is that there has not been what I would call the violent, or not in the violent sense, but complete rejection to even talking about this. The unions have said, well, this is what was our understanding, but we're willing to talk, and the talks are now going to ensue. Because indeed, the wage bill is what really is the greatest expenditure that we have, almost 40%, and that is the one that we need to look at. But the unions have also been really proactive, which is what I have appreciated. They have said, and as I said, they don't want to be the sacrificial lamb, and they said there are a number of other areas where you can look at savings. Let's look at, of course, corruption. Let's look at even some of the contracts that were entered into, contracts that are onerous on government. Let's look at irregular expenditure. And they are saying if we reduce all that, we will find that there can be lots of savings. And to this end, we've actually developed a huge annexure of looking at the variety of savings, including reducing international travel and getting, people who often travel business class to start traveling economy class. And I've even said to the ministers that, when the Air Force plane was not fully functional, I traveled around the country in Mengo, Kulula, and SAF Air, and SAA, and I would travel economy, and it didn't really bother me because it took me to the destination where I needed to go. And that was, in some ways, a demonstration that you can actually begin to reduce the cost of the travel. Of course, because when I travel, there are quite a number of people who go along, and if all of us travel economy, it's much cheaper. It reduces a little bit, although there are too many people who travel with the president. So there are quite a number of areas where we can reduce and meaningfully reduce, but in the end, the public sector wage is still their biggest. And the idea, and this is where I argue that we are not getting into austerity. The idea is we reduce the percentage of the increase, and this is where the savings comes in. And move on to the next question asked by Karima Brown. Are we prepared to revisit our, say, macroeconomic model? And you're absolutely right. The Presidential Economic Council is meeting, and we're going to, and these are bright people that we've brought together. We're going to listen to how they look at our country, proposals that they may come up with. And we want to be an entrepreneurial state. We want to be a state that listens to good ideas that can take our country forward, and whatever can work and produce the growth that we want, we will obviously want to listen to. And if it begins to touch on key principles and ideological positions, then we will talk about that with the various social partners that we have. But the main important thing is that we are open to listening, we're open to hearing fresh ideas, because we want to be an effective entrepreneurial and developmental state. So I'm looking forward, Karima, to this meeting that we are going to have, first meeting of our Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Adrian, with regard to the proposal that has been made by COSATU, which has now been, if you like, appropriated by all the key social partners in NEDLAC, the discussions are ongoing, and I think it is taking the process forward. People are exchanging views and thoughts. Ostensibly, anyone would be concerned that we should put your pension money into a loss-making entity, and all your pensions will be lost. Ostensibly, everyone would be concerned. But this proposal, this compact, envisages an ESCOM that is reformed, restructured, rebuilt, an ESCOM which will have ridden itself of corruption, ridden itself of unfair contracts, an ESCOM which will have followed the money wherever the money has disappeared to, an ESCOM that will have gone out to collect the monies that it is owed, either by individuals, be they in Soweto or anywhere, by municipalities, by government departments. So it is a comprehensive proposal and a compact. And it is quite compelling as I looked at it, because it also includes the process of campaigning, of those social partners saying, we will go out and campaign with you. Yesterday, we had a meeting with the senior management of ESCOM, and we were talking about the debt that they are owed, and we were saying, come up with a number of ideas. Yes, Soweto owes you 16 or 17 billion rand. You need to go out and collect that debt, but come up with clear strategies of how you will collect that debt, and the municipalities and so forth. So we are now going to be looking at a reformed ESCOM. And this is what has given a lot of confidence to trade unionists who are not wagering their members' money into a loss, but who are saying, in the end, we want that the country and the economy depends on ESCOM for us to stay in our jobs. And so, therefore, we need to see this as a collective responsibility for us as unions. We are an entity that has access, yes, to influencing our pension funds. But we also need to see the extent to which we can work with business. And the interesting thing is that business is also locked in these discussions, as well as government. Now, the key question is, and this is where Minister Mbowene's proposal comes in, and he is saying, don't only leave it to public sector pension funds, it should be broader. Now, your question you ask is, shouldn't we be looking at other sources of money? Truth be told, we are one of those countries that is not well developed when it comes to savings. And much of the savings that we have as a country is in the pension funds, and has been so for time immemorial. In 1958, the prescribed assets regime was started in our country, where they decreed by law, the Pension Act, that up to 55% of your pension, the monies that are in the pension fund, will be invested in prescribed assets. That's what they called it, and said, this is what you do. What did that money do? Because that was a huge reservoir of money. That money went into building up today's ESCOM, building up CESOL, building up ISCO, building up the ITC, and so on and so on. So that's what that money did, because there wasn't so much savings at the time. And then in 1989, the prescribed assets regime was then stopped. But then what then came about, what then was inaugurated, was what they called alternative investments, where they said pension funds should invest 10% of their money in alternative investments. And if you are this pension fund, put some of your money in those alternative investments. Well, only 2% has ever been put in alternative investments. And what are those alternative investments? It will be like developmental type of investments, BE type, and so forth. So where is the money in our country? It really is in your pension funds. The Reserve Bank says pension funds have about 8 trillion rand of the savings in working people's hands is in pension funds. Now, if those alternative investments had ramped up to 10%, that would have meant 800 billion that could be invested in alternative investments. And what could they be? Some of them could be ESCOM. Some of them could be water reticulation, the Lesotho Water Highlands. It could be a whole range of others. But that has not happened. That 2% remains at that 2% level. Now, of course, I don't even want to get into the realm of saying prescribed assets, this and so forth. But there is room for us to maneuver. Economies only grow when investments are made. And to make investments, you go to the source of money. And the best way is to go to the source of money where they can make investments rather than loan you the money. You ask, what is the alternative? Where could we get money? Of course, ESCOM has been trying to get money over the past few years and ramped up a debt of 450 billion. We no longer have space to go and loan money. So therefore, what is required now is for investments. And what better space could we be than when ESCOM has now been restructured and has been divided into 3 entities: transmission, generation, and distribution. And that is where any investor spreads their risk. And this we believe, and as the unions and business and communities and government are looking at, this gives us a great opportunity to be able to have a relook at ESCOM. The ESCOM that we are going to have moving forward is going to be a different type of ESCOM than we have had in the past 10 years. So we're going to look at a revamped ESCOM, an ESCOM that will become investment grade once again. Remember that ESCOM used to be, in terms of just rating, used to have a rating that was much more important than the sovereign. And we want to take ESCOM back there. It was greater than the sovereign because it was well run, it was well managed, it had very little debt, and it made money, it made profit. That is the journey that we want to take ESCOM to. And for that reason, I believe that, yes, pension funds should not be too fearful, because we've got an ESCOM journey that is well plotted ahead, which is going to be corruption-free, which is going to be an ESCOM that is not under state capture. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can't sit if the President is standing. But I don't know, Mr. President, because we still have like 5 more rounds of questions.
I will stand, don't worry.
All right. I'll go to that table, you'll be number 1. That table, I'll come back to you front and Mr. President.
In completing the answer to that question, we would obviously like the private sector to also put their money into ESCOM. And obviously their confidence needs to be built up as we move on. And we are going to continue building up the confidence of the private sector. So even private pension funds, we would like them to put money into ESCOM as we move ahead.
Thank you. Marianne, you go first, and then Marianne will follow.
Marianne and David Maverick, if you also stand. reorganization of your administration progressed? How far are some of the plans to turn what is called colloquially, or to establish what is colloquially called a super presidency? What are the deadlines on that? And perhaps, given what you have said to us earlier, you may also want to comment, or it would be appreciated if you could comment on the fact that a number of your ministers in recent weeks and recent months have declined to speak and brief the media on issues pertaining to their portfolio. And generally the reason had been, oh well, no, the president is in charge of this, or the president as commander-in-chief must first say, or the president really is the one that must make the announcement. If that's the attitude by your ministers, maybe time to cut them?
Sorry, the second question that is taken by looking at
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Patricia from SABC News. Just looking at the economic data that came out this morning, and recently the unemployment figures that also show that our situation is not as good as we would want it to be. I just want to check, what is this single and concise message that you would give to the citizens of the country that you have the situation under control and that there is confidence that things are going to change? Because we have, in the recent past, seen several gatherings and initiatives coming from several quarters in the business sector, and including your office, to mobilize investment in the country. But the situation doesn't seem to be improving. And in your view, do you believe that the quality of the responses matches the severity of the economic challenges that the country is facing?
Report, just follow up on what you said about Fiscal. When Mr. already made the announcement about the private sector that Fabian referred to, I can't remember his exact, but regarding this, he mentioned the word equity. Does that mean that parts of Fiscal will be available to buy a stake in it? And secondly, last year with the SONA after the election, you announced a ministerial team that's going to engage with the Ingonyama Trust. Can you give us a progress report on the work of that team?
Okay, thank you. The first one, how far is are we progressing with changing the administration? How far have we progressed? Now, one of the tasks that we had to confront as we really started wrapping our arms around, the state, we should have realized it earlier, but it came more and more to the fore that the capability of the state had been severely weakened. I mean, in some cases, completely dysfunctional. When I addressed the nation last year, soon I think after the elections, I highlighted 7 priorities. And I made a mistake in highlighting the capability of the state as number 6. It should actually have been number 1. Because admittedly, we were looking more at economic growth and said economic growth is number 1 priority, which is obvious because of the economic malaise that we are in now. But in fact, what we should have focused on is, well, what we should have said is the capability of the state is number one. And then everything else hangs on the capability of the state, including the very last one, an Africa that is at peace with itself and peace with the world. It can only happen if the state is capable. Social cohesion can only happen when the state is capable. Expanding the social wage, health, education, only when the state is capable. And economic growth driver has to be a very strong and capable state. So what we've been looking at more closely is to say, how do we strengthen the state? How do we address this key engine? And obviously you do need to have the presidency, which is the apex of government, functioning well. We are not yet where we want to be as the presidency. We are, rebuilding, repositioning the presidency. And the good thing is that nearly everyone has often said, on things such as service delivery, this needs to be driven from the presidency. That's what people have often been saying, that this will be more effective if it is in the presidency. And they go back to those days of past when there used to be presidential projects, special ones like, Alexandra, like I think Khayelitsha and so forth, driven from the center of government to gain more traction and to have good effect. Now, the question often comes up, are we building a super presidency? No, we're building a capable state which has a very functional presidency. And I often say that there are departments in government that should always try to operate at the top of their game. The presidency is one. Foreign DERCO, international relations, is another. Treasury is another. Intelligence is another. The defense force is another. The police is another. And I name them all. Not that the others are less important, but they need to be really operating at the top of their game. So we're not trying to build a super presidency. We're trying to build a capable state. Is that going to be done overnight? No. And we are doing it in a way. The other problem, of course, is many skilled and experienced people have left the state. And our succession planning has not been very good. You may recall that report that was produced by the South African Institute of Race Relations, which talked about the musical chairs that kept moving, and where they said, for instance, the tenure of directors general was like on average like 18 months, 20-something months, and so forth. Now, you can imagine that and see how that state has been weakened. So the presidency, therefore, working together with other departments, is seeking to reposition government. I'll give you a good example. The two offices that we've established in the presidency, the Project Management Office, which is looking at youth unemployment. That office, the people who are heading that office, have taken the trouble to work with every department in government. So the coordination that then takes place with nearly everyone in government has been most admirable, and that is why we are going to come up with a very good youth employment type of initiative. Similarly with infrastructure. The people who we've deployed in there are going to do the same, work with nearly everyone. Now, one of the ways of strengthening the state, because this weakness of the state has been all-pervasive, it's not only at national level, and you've seen it at local level. It's possibly the worst at local level, graduating to provincial level. Now, we've come, and as you've heard, we've come up with the district development model. Now, we've found that around the world is moving towards handling governance at a district level because that is the most effective. Now, we have appropriated this not out of a thumbsuck type of process, but out of experience. We saw it working well in education. The reason why, for instance, the Free State has come up tops in 3 years or so is because they embrace the district development model of pushing education through. And now we are spreading it around the country, that all the 44 districts and the 8 metros must work in terms of this model. Through this, we destroy the silo mentality. Through this, we get more coordination, more intergovernmental processes, and being interdependent and all that. So that way we are strengthening the capability of the state from bottom upwards. But not only that, but we're also getting the state to be properly linked to other key role players in the area. You name it, traditional leaders, you name it, business people, so that we evolve one plan, a plan that will be owned and appreciated by everyone. Now, those ministers who you say you've been talking to, who've said, no, we cannot talk because the president has not pronounced on this and this and that, should not be saying that, because when they say that, that's when the president gets into trouble. That's when the president says he's shocked, and you no longer want to hear that. Now, those ministers need to be made more and more accessible to you. And I'd like to see this, what we're doing today, as the beginning of a reinvigorated process where we will open ourselves to you. And Kusela, I do think we should go back to what we used to do in the past and have the SANEF interaction with government, with me there, the deputy president and the ministers there, so that we engage. Through that, we will then be able to break down the barriers that you feel that the ministers have been building around themselves. Patiswa, given the figures and given the weakness of our economy and unemployment, do I believe that we are coming up with quality responses that match the challenge that we are having? Patiswa, yes, I believe we are. And obviously, in terms of our economy, we are facing both subjective as well as objective factors. The objective factors are those that, like any other country, we may have very little control over, like the coronavirus. The impact of the coronavirus is objective. It comes from the outer space. And what, for instance, Trump has been doing on the trade wars comes from outer space, and a whole number of things. But there are others which we have admitted, which we have said, that's where we made our own mistakes. So those are subjective. Those are factors that we can address and do something about. And I'd like to believe that we have now entered an era where there is no longer any resistance to restructuring, the transformation, and the reforms. The trajectory on reforms has been embraced. We say we are going to reform. Yes, we will continue debating with those who will argue that no, maybe not this reform and not that reform, but this caravan is moving. It is moving. It's a moving caravan. We are going to reform, and we will deal with our own internal challenges and difficulties, but the caravan will continue to move. And as it moves, we will be repositioning our economy for further investment. And we've said that we need more and more investments. And the investments that we've been able to garner speak a lot to the attractiveness of the South African economy to investors, both local as well as offshore investors. It's not many countries who, having set up a target of attracting 1.2 trillion rand, have in the first 2 years almost gone beyond the halfway mark. So it means that we still have attraction. And of course, the other challenge that we face is demand, consumer demand in our economy. And if we had the wherewithal, if we had loads of money, we would embark on the stimulus package akin to what the Americans have tended to do from time to time. Just pour money into the economy, and like what Obama did, put $800 billion into the economy, and that led to enormous growth. When we did our economic recovery and stimulus project, we didn't have the resources. We would have had to go and borrow heavily, which would have then brought our deficit to a higher level. So we're trying to balance quite a lot of things and moving along and not hoping that there will be working to engineer growth so that there is growth in our economy. And what do we say to our people who continue to remain unemployed? We say, you look at what we've done with our budget, even those who say this is an austerity budget. We say what we have sought to do is to put money into, for instance, into the youth program. The youth initiative is one that we're pouring money into to make sure that we do in the end give young people the opportunities, and the opportunities are going to be replete. And we want young people to get into those opportunities. And we're going to focus on small and medium enterprises. We're going to focus on skills development. And we are going through our various, if you like, incentive programs, going to be incentivizing businesses. Even those businesses that can't pay the minimum wage are, if you like, incentivized because they go forward and apply for an exemption. And they are granted exemptions, and that in a way is an incentive of some sort because they can continue employing the people that they employ. So we're working hard to generate growth. And I believe that through patience, through doing all the right things, we should be able to have growth. We're building a foundation which was almost pummeled to smithereens. We're rebuilding and we're repositioning the country, and we are doing all the right things. Now, the one thing that if we had in backfuls is money. If we had loads of money into the economy, and other countries, you know what other countries have done? I think Australia or New Zealand, they just wrote out a check for every citizen and said, here's money, go spend. And suddenly people have like 10,000 rand to go and spend. That's what we could have done, but we don't have the money. So we've got to come up with a number of initiatives. The issue on ESCOM, are we saying that there should be equity play in ESCOM? Now, ESCOM once is divided into three. Now, transmission by definition is your pipeline. Pipeline, that is the ESCOM that continue to be owned by the state completely, and because by definition it has to be, and that is where the security of the country also resides. By generation, by operation at the moment, you're having a number of players. And the initiatives that we have now announced are going to mean that there will be a number of players in generation. And a number of countries, even the most communistic countries you can think of, China, they have a number of generators. And what does that do? It encourages competition, and it ensures that the consumer is not at the mercy of one generator. So there is healthy competition, so that in time to come, that's what we will see. But ESCOM, being as big as it is, will continue to play a very big role because it generates 43,000 megawatts, and even your renewables are still at the 5,000, and it'll take them quite a long time to get there. And of course, distribution is spread out. Local municipalities distribute, and ESCOM also distribute, and ESCOM will continue having the lion's share of that. The Ngonyama Trust, I set up that ministerial committee. It is engaging, and it is engaging wonderfully at the KZN level, with a number of players, both government in the province as well as a number of officials in the Ngonyama Trust. So that engagement carries on, and I'll be getting a report soon of the next phase that they have reached. So work is underway in that regard. Thank you.
So, Mr. President, before I give you a chance to ask the media questions.
Yes.
The editorials, I see Monty Makaya. I'll take one last round. So let me go to the table at the back. Ma'am, you're going to do the next one, and then you, ma'am. And then I have promises. Okay, bonus points, TV, and then thank you. Sorry, Annika.
That's all right.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Lindsay Dentlinger from ENCA. Campuses around the country are burning. Today there were rectors, VCs, also SRC members in Parliament discussing the issue. Universities saying they are teetering on the brink of bankruptcy because of the millions owed to them in outstanding fees. Students saying government has failed them, calling it a war on war, because they say they're being excluded not on the basis of academics but financially. What is government's plan going forward in terms of free tertiary education?
Mr. President, good afternoon. It's Carol Payton from Business Day. On Jan's question, because if you're saying that pension funds must invest in ESCOM, they can only invest through debt or equity. So if they're going to invest through debt, you've still got a debt problem for ESCOM. And the obvious solution is to sell some power stations and pay down some of your debt. And I know that this is it's an idea that has been talked about in the ANC Economic Transformation Committee, and it seems like it's being blocked by a kind of out-of-touch ideology that privatization is necessarily a bad thing. Can you comment on that, please?
I would have.
igama usiyavuya mhlekazi omhle ndisuka kuphephandaba iCape Time ngaxolela ndazibeka ngesidwe ngiyanibizo ndicela ukubuza mna kwezi commission ukuzivulileyo malunga naleyo zone utata umphathi ujustice uretired justice Mphathi iripoti uyifumene ngokwazi kwam ndiyayazi awukayikhuphi kodwa ke ndicela ubuza ukuba zintoni izifundo ozifundileyo kulaa ripoti. Ndicela ubuza Mr. President, sendizawugqiba mhlekazi ungadini usahamba phofu ekuseni and then ke ngokuyogqibela Mr. President, upresident xa enozireyitha since wathatha i-office masithi out of 10 upresident angazibeka phala enkosi mhlekazi.
Hello, Tiki Madia from News 24. In fact, he asked the last question is part of my question. Mr. President, I'm going to ask you, what do you make as an assessment of yourself? You know, we have a lot of reviews about you, obviously, as a country. A lot of the people are saying you've missed many opportunities to come to the party. I also wanted to get an assessment from you of how you've performed. Secondly, you speak about building a capable state. What does that vision entail? Will you still be at the helm of building that capable state towards 2024? Will you be asking a mandate? Thank you.
Okay. Oh, there's another one. Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Mario Sanyani from Power News.
Just three quick questions. The first one is the high-level review panel on intelligence that you set up and the recommendations that they made. And we have seen in recent times break-ins in our state security agency offices. I wonder how severe are the implications and what is the level of stability within the state security agency if we see this continuous break-ins? Are we at all safe as a country, because we are told confidential documents are stolen and lots of money? And secondly, a while back, Mr. President, you instructed the Minister of Basic Education, Neji Matsekha, to conduct a thorough survey in terms of the pit latrines following the death of our kids in this inhumane manner. As part of this infrastructure development program that's going to be rolled out, are there specific timeframes in terms of mud schools in rural areas and pit latrines in particular, as to when we're going to see them completely demolished and replaced with decent ablution facilities? And finally, on the issue of building a capable state, Mr. President, I think it was the funeral of one of the ambassadors, if I'm not mistaken, Ambassador Billy Modise. One of the veterans of the ANC challenged me at the time to say, to avoid the musical chairs and also to make sure that there is consistency within the state, he suggested at the time that is it possible that the president, actually it was more like an instruction, being a veteran of the ANC, that can we ensure that the DGs are given about 10-year contracts so that when ministers are moved around and so on, but the business of government should continue? And I remember you nodded at the time. Are you considering it? Thank you.
Thank you. Which one? Okay. Oh yes, the campuses and the issue, the turmoil that is unfolding. Now, each beginning of the year, I think we face challenges, particularly of young people who find themselves not being readmitted for a whole number of reasons, either not having registration money or being said that they owe. I think what we need to recognize is that as government, we have moved mountains and seas to make sure that our young people do get free tertiary education, particularly those who come from working class families and poor families who earn up to a certain amount of money. Those have been our great focus and priority. A few years ago, we used to spend up to 12 billion rand just on supporting NSFAS. We now spend 35 billion rand. And we've upped it, and it keeps on increasing. And we are not letting up on this, because this is an important area of empowering and skilling our young people. And inevitably, there will be a number of those who either come from the missing middle, those young people whose parents earn slightly above the amount that has been put as a hurdle, and that's where the real pressure is. And we need to be focusing on that, because we've realized that that's where the challenge is, including student accommodation, which I also spoke about in SONA. And what is of concern, of course, is that when there are these frustrations, it then results into the burning of buildings, destruction of university property, and it should never really get to that. It should be, these are matters that can be resolved through discussion, through proper consultation. And of course, yes, university campuses or universities themselves are owed quite a bit of money, But I'd like to believe that that money has sort of tapered down quite a lot now that government is putting so much money into the bursary system of our young people. And we need to do more. And I will be the first to admit that much more needs to be done, because our return rate of those that we are funding is still below the 50% mark. Our pass rate, those young people that we are funding in through large amounts of money. And clearly, much more needs to be done. And I found that your more successful bursary schemes, like the one which we inaugurated through Sasria, we set up a fully fledged assistance program around every young person who we supported. And a number of young people have now become actuaries, and the pass rate was in the 80% or 90% because we set up a support mechanism. Now, through this, we just give young people money. We don't have a support mechanism, and a number of them come from challenged educational backgrounds as well as social backgrounds. So a lot needs to be done, and I've said to the Minister we need to focus on the pass rate of all those young people that we are supporting. Carol, you say I dodged the question. No, I don't think I did, but to the extent that you believe that I did, obviously there will be a choice between whether it's debt or equity. Now, the POSATU proposal that has been put forward has an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, in the middle, which would mean that you would either be looking at an equity instrument or vehicle. Of course, they want government to underwrite that so that they are they kept their own loss position. That's one thing that government obviously needs to look at. And we will need to determine whether that is a debt instrument or an equity instrument, and the extent to which there will be exposure to the sovereign. So those are the issues that need to be crunched. But you're also raising a very interesting issue, because we have not remained static. The discussions are ongoing, including, for instance, should some power stations be sold? Now, this is not a new idea. Some people have come up with ideas, and some of them have sort of located them around old power stations that are going to be decommissioned. There are quite a number of power stations that will be decommissioned, and there are a number of players who have come to the fore and have said, we can run these power stations much more effectively and profitably than Eskom. When you get to a point of decommissioning them, sell them to us. We will generate electricity, pump it into the grid, and it is an option that we should look at. I'm most interested in us looking at that option and saying, is there a way in which we can go in this direction? Because if we do, it will then give your workers, it will also give the communities in the area the transition that we've been talking about, because the towns where those power stations are located would die if those power stations are decommissioned. And Carol, some of them are even coming forward and saying, much as these are old and they are old generation technology, we can bring new technology to clean the coal, to reduce the emissions. Now, these are interesting ideas that we will come to the fore. So in that way, you parcel them out, you've sold them, and Eskom then continues to focus on the key, big and newer generation power stations. Now, some people, if I may say so, even came up with the idea that, why don't you sell Medupi and Kusile? And we immediately said, we've just built them. And we really, they are like the Rolls-Royce that must continue residing in Eskom's asset base. Now, there is a number of options that are coming to the fore, and we would be open. Now that we have said self-generation can be looked at, and towns can generate their own power, then it opens up a whole range of possibilities. And I believe that we've now arrived at a stage where our power generation has now entered a new era. And a new era that should not be driven by ideology, but should be driven by pragmatism. Pragmatism that should mean that which can deliver power effectively should do so. Now, ESCOM, obviously, having been divided into the three and the transmission remaining the crown jewel of the nation, means that you are then able to look at a number of other options going forward. Siyavuya ubuze umbuzo uti ama commissions lawa. These commissions, what's happening? The commissions are continuing. The Zondo Commission is continuing. We now have a new time frame, and they, like all of us, suddenly realize that to do the work that they are supposed to do is going to take a much longer period. And we need to allow them to finish their work, as they should. And the PIC Commission, you want to know what is in it. Do you really want me to reveal now to you what is? If I did, I would be unfair to the others. So why don't you wait until the report is released? Within days, that report is out and everyone will be able to see it. Do I still walk? Yes, I still walk. Some of the meetings I go to start too early and to prevent me from doing my walks. And so I always gauge myself. I need to walk 10 kilometers for the walk to be effective. And so that takes me almost 2 hours. I'm not a very fast walker, but I enjoy my walks, so I still walk. How do I rate myself? Ooh, that's nice. I have dedicated myself to doing everything I can to execute my mandate. And some of the things I've had to do may have shocked you. But the one thing that I have sought to do is to continue my hard work rate, because I work hard. I'm not lazy. I build consensus. Some people would like me to be a dictator, and it is not in my makeup to be a dictator. I've never been, and I built and led a number of organizations without being a dictator, and working very well with people and making them feel worthwhile and worthy to work in an organization, and respecting the capability of people, not given to shouting and screaming at people and so on. And that is my style. And some people have even said what you should do. For instance, some people have said, you're a weak president because you are not going to agree to fire the workers at ESCOM. And I said, if that defines me as a weak president, that's fine. Because when we deal with the issue of unemployment and dealing with people losing their jobs, we've got to try and find many solutions, as many solutions as possible. And if not firing people defines me in that way, that's fine. And I will continue doing the work that I have to do. How do I rate myself? CD also asks my own assessment. I rate myself very well, CD. I think I do. I'm a hard worker. I really am a hard worker. Will I be asking for a mandate in 2024?
You specifically.
Who, me specifically?
At the helm of the governing party, say, put your faith in Cyril Ramaphosa once more.
It's.
So do you want to run again? That's ultimately.
Like when I was elected by a collective at a conference. And the collective said, we want to put you in this position. And the same thing might happen in 2024. So stick around. You may see this movie again. Then there was the colleague from Power News, the high panel report, yes, with regard to the stability of our nation, intelligence, yes, the reason we established or put together the high panel was because we had challenges. And as we work to implement that the recommendations, we obviously are resolving some of those challenges to ensure that there is stability and there is general safety for the people of South Africa from a security point of view. Pit latrines, as well as mud schools, what is the time frame? In this regard, we've set a number of time frames as a government. We have, and it's very tempting for a government to say by X date this will have happened, and we've learned from hindsight that that is not the best way of doing it. Just get on and do the work. If you do the work, and people will see that you are achieving. Now, obviously, we wanted to get rid of mud schools. It did not happen as easily as it should, but work is being done. The mud schools are being gotten rid of. The pit latrines as well. The progress has not been according to my liking. It's been much slower than what I had wanted, but it is being done. And I asked for the report just yesterday, and it's not at the level that I want, but I'm going to make sure that we speed up our pace in doing this. Lastly, you referred to Ubaba Sangweni, Professor Sangweni. He's the one who, at the funeral of Ambassador and former Minister Skweyiya, said that DGs must be given a 10-year contract. I would actually say it should be much longer, because part of the weakening of the state came about when DGs were changed. As a minister came into office, they felt that I didn't like this DG, and they changed, and another one came in. And then they were given 5-year contracts. And what inevitably happens with anyone is that you're given a 5-year contract, and mid-term, you start looking elsewhere because you're not so sure that the minister looks at you with favor every morning and they smile and so forth. You say, I think I should start preparing to get out of here. And you defocus. You lose focus. You no longer get focus on the work that you have to do. You start going for interviews quietly, and it basically means that we have lost the DG. And sometimes the DG is changed and we start all over again, and there hasn't been succession planning. Now, this started, obviously, at the turn of our democracy, where there was obviously a view that those who had served in the past needed to be transited out through the Government of National Unity and the Sunset Clause, and so therefore a time limit was put. But the problem is we let the pendulum swing too much the other way, to a point where we then started losing what strengthens the state of having a professional, if you like, cohort of civil servants who know that their task is to serve the people of South Africa, but also importantly, to have a cohort of civil servants that is depoliticized, that just focuses on the work that needs to be done and have tenure. Now, we lost the tenure part and we started interfering. We started politicizing them, and this is what has brought us to where we are, to have a state that is not as capable as it should be. So do I support 10-year contract? I support more than 10 years. And I believe that we must professionalize our civil service, and our civil servants must be appointed by a public service commission, and through that we then take the politics out of those who are supposed to serve the people of South Africa, and they have longer tenure rather than truncated tenure for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Sir, thank you so much.
Is that it? I'm glad.
Okay. We really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time. So I'm hearing that we are probably going to see you then next quarter. Thank you once again, and I hope that this was as fruitful for you as it was for us. I did indicate that a number of the President's advisors are here. International Relations Advisor Dr. Kulumbata, Dadu Charles Magula, our Security Advisor. I see at the back, Special Advisor Donay Mikol is also here. So if you have any follow-up on some of the issues, they are more than happy to speak to you, and the acting CEO of GCIS. Thank you so much.